everyone, and welcome. So we'll start with item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies from councillors Armitage, Holmes, Pickering and Brian Wright. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Barker?
I did. Councillors Barry, Rouse and Ridgway.
Yes, sorry, councillors Barry and Ridgway and Rouse. Thank you. Any others? Councillor Cupit?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest and or other interests not already on their register of interests in any item on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. And I'm declaring item 10 on the HRA as a member of Ricknell board. Are there any other declarations?
I'm on Ricknell board as well. So.
Thank you, Councillor Ruff. Councillor Welton. Same. Councillor Liggett? No. Councillor Clough? Thank you. Any others? No. Item 3 then, minutes of the last meeting to approve as a correct record to sign the attached minutes of the council meeting held on the 29th of November. They have been circulated. Can we have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Cupit, seconded by Councillor Powell. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Well, thank you, they are carried. Item 4 then, Chairman's announcements. You will all be aware of the devastating news of the attack on former Bolsover Chairman and Consort Ken and Frida Walker. Ken was a member of the Strategic Alliance Committee between our two authorities and a keen advocate of the partnership. I have the privilege of knowing Ken for 20 years and am aware of his drive to make a difference in his local community. Both Ken and Frida were an excellent civic couple. Those of you who knew them both will say their love and care for each other was evident, and Frida was the kindest person you could wish to meet. Her death is truly shocking. Ken is still critically ill in hospital. I'm sure you'll all join me in sending thoughts and prayers to Ken, their family and friends, but also join me in a moment's silence in tribute to Frida. Thank you, colleagues. I was saddened to learn of the sudden death of Joachim Rupert, Mayor of Gross Umstadt. The town is in the Landkreis of Darmstadt-Dieburg. His untimely passing has taken a person who had a positive vision for the partnership between our two districts. I have conveyed our condolences to our colleagues in Germany. Some of you will know that Councillor William Armitage had a heart attack recently. There is nothing that can keep Councillor Armitage down, let alone a cardiac arrest. We all wish him a very speedy recovery and look forward to hearing his dulcet tones in due course. May I express sincere sympathies to Councillor Steve Pickering on the passing of his wife. I am sure we are all in accord that he has our full support at this time. The 6th of February marks the 70th anniversary of the accession of Her Majesty the Queen to the throne. Jean and I will be representing North East Derbyshire at a service of commemoration at Derby Cathedral this week. The Council will surely recognise the Queen's devotion to duty and record of selfless service to this country. The district will be joining with others in sending our sincere congratulations on reaching a significant milestone in her reign and our nation's history. I will be attending a race night on the 18th of February at the Shinnon in North Wingfield in aid of my appeal for Ashgate Hospice. The event has been organised by Councillor Barry and is free to attend. The first race is at 8 p.m, so hopefully you'll be able to come along. I am grateful to North Wingfield Parish Council, who had a bucket collection for my appeal at the switching on of their Christmas lights. I'm also appreciative of donations from Ashover Parish Council, along with Shirland and Higham Parish Council. The sellout Burns night was an outstanding success. Perhaps you will consider attending the Elvis night on the 12th of March. Don't just talk about it, book tickets, or as Elvis would say, a little less conversation, a little more action, please. I could have done worse. Once again, thank you to colleagues who are making a difference to support my endeavours on behalf of the hospice. Thank you. Item 5, leaders' announcements. Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just check everyone can hear me okay before I rattle on. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. So I'm conscious we have a busy agenda today, so I'm only going to cover a few fairly quick items, hopefully. So firstly, in relation to COVID, we have seen a reduction recently. We had a reduction of about 30% between last week and the week before, which is very positive. I think I'm sure we'll all agree. Although we have had a very slight uptick in the past week, probably linked to the delayed impact of schools returning. We're currently at around 660 cases per 100,000. That's still very high for what we're more used to. Thinking about sort of the summer onwards of last year, cases were usually significantly lower than that. So we are still high, albeit the general trend is a downward one now, which is encouraging. With the lifting of Plan B restrictions, we're still asking residents, though, to be cautious, to use common sense, and clearly to take whatever measures they feel comfortable with to try and protect themselves and reduce the spread. In terms of the impact on the council, I think we'll all be aware that sickness and absence was high at the beginning of the year, but it is largely back to normal now, with one or two cases. There was some significant pressure within street scene and refuse collection at the beginning of the month, but I want to thank all staff for working so hard to keep our essential services going and with absolutely minimal disruption to residents. In particular, I want to thank Paul Denton, Eddie Owen, Jake Johnson, Alex Hunter, Kieran Smith, Ryan Coupland, Steve Wright, Carl Bolton, Charles Haslam, Steve Ransom, Leon Heald, Alan Walker, Paul Gascoigne, Jamie Howson, Sean Cross, Ashley Faith, Cliff Hardy, Chris Humman, and Mark Nuttall, who all went above and beyond by volunteering to do refuse collection shifts to support the existing teams. This is a great example of the one team culture within this council, and it's incredibly reassuring to know how flexible our staff are willing to be to the demands of the organisation and ready to pitch in and to support one another. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of all councillors when I say a really big thank you to them. Moving on, I'm delighted that Eckington Leisure Centre is now reopened after its £1.5 million transformation. I was really pleased to be able to go and have a look just before Christmas when the finishing touches were being made, and it does look absolutely fantastic. It was great to have an opportunity to visit all of our leisure centres as well as our street scene depot. And speaking to staff, particularly in the leisure centres, there is a real buzz around the levels of investment and commitment to leisure by the council at the moment, particularly at a time when many other councils are closing them down. And in related news, I'm really pleased to inform members that last week Cabinet formally accepted a £1.4 million grant from the government's public sector decarbonisation scheme to do a very similar improvements to Drumfield Leisure Centre. The pool was relatively recently refurbished and therefore won't be affected, but it is very welcome funding, and it will be used to help reduce the carbon impact of the facility, in particular with the installation of air source heat pumps and solar panels on the roof, together with other internal improvements. It's not exactly clear yet when the works will begin, but obviously we're hoping to do that as soon as possible. And it's hoped that when they do, the disruption to service users will be absolutely minimal. So I'm sure everyone will agree that's really good news and very welcome funding to do some much needed improvements there. I think most of the other items I wanted to raise are already on the agenda, Chair, so I will leave it at that and allow us to move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So item 6, public participation. No questions have been submitted under procedure rule number 8, sorry, for this meeting. So we move to item 7, which is adoption of Schedule 3 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982 as amended, and the sex establishment policy. So Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. So it's back to me. As the report makes clear, our General Licensing Committee resolved to refer this matter to full council so that we can adopt the relevant legislation and policies to give the authority the power to control the number and the location of sex establishments within the district. The draft policy before us today has been to the committee on 2 separate occasions, as well as through a 13-week public consultation last year. As far as can be achieved, the views of respondents have been taken into account in the revised draft that's before us today. It's noted that there is strong opposition to any establishments being set up within the district, but we do need this policy in place in order to be able to regulate them should they arise. I think it's fairly straightforward and procedural. Hopefully all members have had a chance to read through the policy. Excuse the pun, but there's nothing sexy at all about this policy. So I'm happy to move the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Well, actually, you can't move them. You're not present in the meeting. So do we have someone to propose the, thank you, Councillor Liggett, and do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Gomez-Rene. Do we have any comments or questions? Councillor Cornwell.
I didn't know we were allowed to partake if we were on Zoom. Have I misunderstood some new rule?
No, there's no new rule.
But Alex Dale has partaked twice already in the meeting, and I didn't think the regulations were that if we were on Zoom, we were allowed to partake in the meeting. Has there been another change?
I'm just going to hand to the monitoring officer.
The rules haven't changed. The rules are that you're not counted as being present for the purposes of section 85, the 6-month rule, and that you cannot move or second or vote on an item. Whether you can speak is at the discretion of the chair.
And the rule that hasn't changed is could you stand when you're addressing the meeting as well, please? So any comments or questions about the report? Councillor Shipman?
Yeah, it's just a few.
Could I ask you to stand, please?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. There's just a few things actually. From reading through the document, I get the impression like it's been created to stop these sorts of establishments coming to the district. Because if you look at the sorts of places where we're saying they are not allowed, the only place I've come to realise that we can actually have one is probably in the middle of a forest somewhere. And I think that by doing that, we're actually shooting ourselves in the foot, because when we get challenged on the fact that we're not giving people sufficient and appropriate places to have them, we're leaving ourselves open for that challenge. And I think that we need to actually look at, like, I'd like the leaders to explain where he thinks we could have one. Where does he believe it is a good place to have an establishment like this that's the policy is trying to regulate? But I would also like to, if possible, to make an amendment to the motion to change a few things in the policy itself, because in a policy like this, the main aim of it should be to reduce harm for the employees that work in them and any customers or clients that they have going to them. And actually, I did a word search on this whole policy, and it doesn't even use the word harm and reduce harm at all. And I think that in 1.1, paragraph 3, I think we need to insert reducing harm after the word seeking to, because that to me is what the policy should be about. And where it says Appendix B, point 20, it says that the door staff or any security should be no more than 5 meters away from somebody. I think that needs to be changed to no more than, let's say, 5 seconds away, because if there's obstacles in the way between someone that's trying to police these establishments, take longer than 20 seconds if there's people that are there in the way, tables, cupboards, whatever it might be. And I think that wording needs to change to 5 seconds rather than 5 meters. And in point 22 of the same section of Appendix B, it should read that rather than it being single-sex toilets, I think it needs to be changed to single cubicles / rooms that are unisex toilets, so we're not restricting what the establishments can do in terms of people using the restrooms, because that just makes more sense to me. Why would you prescribe it to be single sex and allow multiple people to in? Because that assumes that, let's say, women don't attack women in toilets, or men don't attack men in toilets, which is obviously a bizarre thing to assert, because that does happen. So I think we actually just need to tidy the policy up on these just few things as part of my amendment, if that's okay, Chair.
It's not a motion, Councillor Shipman. So, but you're asking for inclusions or amendments to the policy.
I'm asking for the motion that's on the recommendations that are on the table to be amended and add that the amendments I've just read out are included in the policy. That is possible.
But there isn't a motion. There isn't a motion on the table. It's a report with recommendations.
That is the motion, though, Chair. The motion is that we accept the recommendations.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. What I would like to say, this is one more example, yet again, where the work should be done in committee. You'll find all us working in committee to make changes to policies like this. No, let me speak. We make those adjustments in committee, and we all have that input. They get made there, then they get brought here. What you're doing is you're making a grandstand again at council rather than working in committee. Everybody knows that. One more time. Thank you, Chair.
So you've made a proposal. So you need a seconder, Councillor Shipman. Councillor Hancock, are you wishing to speak now, Councillor Hancock?
I'll reserve the right, Chair. Thank you.
So any comments or questions about the proposed motion which has been seconded? Thank you. I can chair the meeting, Councillor Hall, without your help. Councillor Barker.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I am a bit confused with this. I tend to agree with Councillor Foster a bit. This is not the place. It's a big policy that to start just adding bits and taking bits away. I don't feel as though this is the right place to be doing that. Well, it might be changing the whole concept. I was travelling through trying to find which bits you're on about, so I'm not entirely clear. It might change a full paragraph to something that I don't agree with. So I don't know. I'm looking for assistance, really. Is there any way of sort of referring it back and looking at those proposals? That is it urgent it goes today, I suppose.
We've got Councillor Kenyon, and then I've got Councillor Rennick, and then Councillor Reader. And I can see Councillor Dale on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I don't think we should be amending at this stage for the reasons Councillor Bark has just given. Just for example, the 5 metre to 5 second change. There's not just a reaction time, but also a visibility of what's going on. And, you know, I'm not saying bouncers are 100-metre runners, but 5 seconds could be 40 metres, which changes completely the intent of that. So I think this is not the right place to change it. If people want to change it, bring up a review of the policy and submit a revised policy at some time in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rennick.
Yeah, same, Chair. I think we rely on these policy groups with officers' input to make sure these are right within law, within parameters. I'm not an expert. 5 metres, 5 seconds, whether it's appropriate. I can't. You might be right, but I don't know. I don't want to take your word for it. I want to take somebody who knows what they're talking about.
Councillor Reader.
Thank you, Chair. I was part of the committee that, you know, talked about this, and I felt we really did take account of all the information that we had to hand at the time. You know, we had Kevin Shilletail that was in there with us. We were able to ask him questions about all the legals ins and outs of it, and I felt we did quite a lot of work as part of that committee to satisfy ourselves with the policy itself. I think it does go far enough and covers that. All those questions were asked at that committee about harm. You know, so I do feel that we should just move it along. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, generally speaking, I agree with all the comments that have been made. There's been ample opportunity, a full 13-week consultation, you know, various iterations of this draft. So through committee, there's been ample opportunity to make these sorts of changes. As with all policies, it will be reviewed at some stage in the future, and that gives any councillors the opportunity to suggest any amendments. As to the question that Councillor Shipman asked me directly, I mean, the policy doesn't restrict numerically or by location the number of any sex establishments, but he asked me, so on a personal basis, I would say that I don't particularly feel that there are any appropriate locations. I think the better location would be in a more built-up area, but obviously we need to have a policy in place to be able to guide decision-making on this, and that's what this is all about. So I'd support the adoption of this policy today, and if there are further tweaks or suggestions that they want to make changes, then do that as part of a policy review at a later stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Hancock, coming to you for your right to reply.
Thank you, Chair. I think it does kind of highlight sometimes the problems we have when reports come to committee, and they are very abridged. I mean, we're going to have this problem later on as well, I think. It clearly doesn't have, as Councillor Reader says, obviously discussions were had during committee, but this is not necessarily reflective of all of those things that were considered, and that perhaps is a failing in the way that we are getting reports presented. I do think, I do agree with what Councillor Shipman says. I'm happy to second this, but I also take on board, and I'm not sure if it was Councillor Rennick or Councillor Kenyon, so apologies to two, but I do think there was a very valid point raised that actually there perhaps does need to be a provision for both distance and time, because time is critical, but yes, things also need to be within visibility. So it may be a case that there does need to be a reference back rather than necessarily a case of adopting anything with amendments today. But I do think there's definitely a learning point in terms of how things are presented to council on here.
Thank you. Councillor Shipman, you're right to reply.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Hancock just touched on, there's certain points that were raised in committee. And Councillor Foster says this all the time. Well, it should have been raised at committee. It should have been raised at committee. We should have done this in committee. We are the decision maker in this council. I know you like keep passing things around in committees all week, but we are the decision maker. If we want to amend a policy for this council, we can do it here. We don't need to keep passing it around committees. And when points are raised in committee, they're not always included in the final policy, as we found out, because Councillor Hancock did raise the 5 metre thing in committee. And again, it's still in there. So to say that somehow they're not being fed into committee is absolute nonsense. So I don't understand why you get up and say it, because you know it's lies, but you carry on saying it anyway. I think what we need to do is, if it's possible, Chair, if we can have a look at the things I've suggested and perhaps try and tie them in if they're legally appropriate, or if we can make, we can tighten the policy up. Perhaps officers can look at this after this committee. Obviously, we do need to adopt the policy. I'm not saying we should reject the policy. I was just trying to improve it at full council, where we make the decision on what the policy ultimately looks like.
Point of order, Chair. Isn't the words it's lies a breach of our code of conduct?
Not if it's true.
As I said before, comments like lies and things, probably not the most helpful words to be using in debate, but I prefer not to have any opinions of that nature bandied around, whether you think it's true or not. In response to your comments, Councillor Shipman, I'm not preempting the decision of where the vote might be on your amendment, but let's just imagine it was lost. I'm sure the suggestions you've raised can be taken into account by officers, and when the policy is reviewed, those considerations can be taken at that point. I'm sure that would be a way of having your feedback taken seriously. So it's been moved and seconded that those amendments are included. All those in favour of the amendment? All those against? Any abstentions? So the amendments are lost. Then we come to the substantive recommendations that have been proposed and seconded. So are there any final comments or questions about those recommendations? If not, then we move to the vote on the recommendations. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Those are carried. Thank you. Item 8, the annual audit report. Over to you, please, Councillor Parkin.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I've got 4 items on the agenda today, so I'll be fairly brief. I'd like to present the annual audit letter in respect of 2020 and 2021 from the Council's external auditor, Mazars, for the Council to know. Mazars presented their audit findings to the Audit Committee on the 30th of September and issued an unqualified audit opinion on the financial statements on the 30th of November. I'll hand it back to you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll come to proposing and seconding shortly, so it gives an opportunity for comments or questions. Are there any? I think it was given a rigorous discussion at Finance and Audit. So you're proposing, Councillor Parkin?
I recommend to move, yes.
And I second. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That's carried. Item 9 then, the invitation to become an opted body for external audit appointments. Over to you, please, Councillor Parkin.
Thank you very much, Chair, once again. The purpose of this report is to request the approval of Council to accept the Public Sector Audit Appointments, or PSAA, from here on, because it's a mouthful, invitation to become an opted-in authority for the appointment of external auditors, which happens typically every 5 years, and this is due in April 2023, or to commence in April 2023. PSAA are the current appointing person for local authority audits and have been confirmed as continuing the role of appointing person for the next period, which commences at April 2023. As previously, PSAA have invited eligible bodies to opt into their national scheme for auditor appointments ahead of a procurement process, finalising appointments before the required deadline of the 31st of December 2022. The Council opted into the national scheme in 2016, and the benefits of opting into the national scheme remain, and these are laid out at 1.3 in the report. Opting into the national scheme provides a sector-led collaborative approach, offering the best value for money and assuring independence of the auditor appointment. Not using the national scheme would require a local procurement exercise, which would not benefit from the economies of scale of a national procurement exercise. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Again, it was considered at Finance and Audit Committee. So we're moving to the proposal, please, Councillor Parkin.
Thank you, Chair. I recommend to move this. That the council accept the public sector audit appointments invitation to opt into the national scheme for the appointment of external auditors for 5 consecutive financial years commencing April 2023.
Thank you. And I second. We got value for money there. You read the whole recommendation out. So thank you. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. And item 10, the medium-term financial plan. The HRA bit we'll have to deal with separately. So we'll go to the bit without the HRA bit first, Councillor Parkin.
Thank you, Chair. Today I'm presenting the medium-term financial plan, which encompasses the current year's budget, the original budget for 2022/23, and the planning budgets for the following 3 years to 2025/6. In 2019, I inherited a £2 million budget gap left by the previous administration. Today, I'm again able to present to Council a balanced budget for the upcoming financial year. This is the 3rd year running that we have done so. And two of these years, we were in unprecedented times of a global pandemic. Hopefully that will soon be over. But the diligence and the progress that we have made in the finance arena is specifically and very deliberately recognised by me in large part the excellent work of our Section 151 officer, Jane Dethick, and her excellent team, who are ever vigilant and committed to keeping the council finances firmly on track. I will present the budget in more detail in due course, but first I want to provide an update on the national settlement for next year. The Secretary of State, in his letter to council leaders in December, recognised the vital role that councils play within local communities, and never more so than during the pandemic. The government's priority in this settlement is to provide stability in the intermediate term. This means much of last year's settlement has been rolled over, as in previous years. This includes the new homes bonus, which was hugely welcome news to us, with a windfall payment of £609,000. The lower tier services grant has also been retained, and our allocation is £126,000. And finally, in recognition of the wide range of additional services provided by local councils to the community, a one-off services grant has been introduced, and our award from that is £193,000. The government plans to consult over the next year on updating the funding system, and have for the first time confirmed that there will be transitional protections to accompany any funding reforms. This is important as it helps to dampen the impact of the reform and provides us with some time to review and adapt our own plans. We were pleased that the Secretary of State recognised the work this council does in the local community, and comforted by the stability afforded for next year. But this is a one-year settlement, so forecasting for 2023 onwards remains challenging until we know more about the funding reforms proposed. So now I will present the general fund budget. COVID is still impacting a little, but much less than last year. Some services are recovering from loss of income compared to pre-pandemic levels, but it's pleasing to note that they continue to improve. I'll draw your attention now to table 1 on page 100 of your packs, which summarises the financial good progress is being made towards securing future years' savings ahead of schedule. Contrast this with the MTFP in 2019, and you'll see that the £2 million hole left by the previous administration is reduced significantly. A strong and effective culture of financial management sits right across this council, maintaining momentum on identifying and implementing savings. And it's key to this financial management is identifying those savings. It's endemic within our organisation now. The summary of the council's efficiency plan at Appendix 3, page 104, should you be following, summarises our planning and commitment to retain a balanced financial plan. The efficiency plan isn't exactly new. This work has been and will continue to be undertaken by the council's senior management team, working collaboratively with the leadership. Monitoring and reporting on progress is important to us, and as such, progress against this plan will form part of the financial monitoring that is already scrutinised by the Cabinet and Audit Committee, thank you, each quarter. Appendix 3 is a summary. The detailed working document is a living plan owned, as I said previously, by senior management, by the senior management team and leadership. You'll note that within each category are initiatives, and behind each initiative are numerous projects and plans. I'll give you one, for example. Don't want to overburden anybody. Digital transformation. So not a new initiative, but new ideas are coming forward from this initiative all the time. COVID has taught us the importance of digital services to our community, and we plan to keep responding to this. Currently planned digitisation projects include looking at better ways to process applications in the revenues team, better integration of information in legal services, and a move from paper-based systems in a number of services, including land charges. I trust that you will all be reassured by these plans. I certainly am, and I'm confident that they will be delivered. Moving on to council tax, we are aware and completely understand the pressures on our residents' household budgets. Council tax setting is always a difficult decision. This council faces the same costs and inflationary pressures as any other organisation. We want to keep delivering high quality services our residents have benefited from since 2019. So this year, we are recommending to council a below inflation rise of 2.58%, which equals 10 pence per week for the average Band D household. And finally, the General Fund Capital Programme is relatively static at the current time, with no major changes to report right now. Chair.
Thank you. You're just coming to the end of your time there, Councillor Parkin. So are you moving the recommendations from 1 to 6? Thank you. Do you have a seconder for those? Thank you, Councillor Cupid. Are there any comments or questions about the general fund from recommendations 1 to 6? Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. I would thank Councillor Parkin for the report, but several months ago, actually, we did ask for a little bit more detailed report in terms of what was on here. And rather than say that you don't want to overburden us, I would rather be overburdened and go through the details so I actually know what I'm looking at and know what I'm voting for, because there's still lots of anticipateds and hopefully we can do this in headline stuff, but no actual detail behind it. So the reality is I am disappointed, and yes, we're delivering a balanced budget, but the reality is we're delivering a balanced budget by pulling pretty much everything we've got out of reserves based on this. So I'm concerned with it. We know that households are going to be under pressure. We don't know what the impact is going to be on the revenues we generate through the leisure centres and such like that, because those are luxury items that are likely to go as cost of living increases. So I'm concerned at the robustness of the estimates that have been used, but we do need more detail than what we've got here, considerably more so.
Thank you, Councillor Barker.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd echo a bit of that, but I think we have had a good year, and I'd echo what you said about Jane Dethick, the finance team. I think they've done a great job. They really hard, and there's obviously every year under pressure with central government cutting back. But I think we've had a good year this year. We've had a bit of a extra monies, as you listed, from the new house bonus, one or two other things that's come forward, and like you say, it is cost of living going up one thing or another. Other councils, police authority, wherever going to put their precepts up. I think we can afford not to put it up this much this year. We have still got some in reserves, and we're tapping into that regularly. I will take exception to that £2 million funding gap. I'm not quite sure where you got that one from, but there has always been the prospect of it being 2 million further down the line, but I don't think we left you with one. But anyway, that's we can argue about that somewhere else. But so we're if we're just voting on it one at a time, we're not in support of the putting that council tax up £5 at this point in time. I think we can manage without it.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Shipman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we had this in audit, and I asked the same question there. Well, where's all the detail? Because Councillor Parkin stood in this chamber, when was it, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, promised us he'd be here in January with some solid plans. It's looking at me like I'm talking a foreign language, but you were stood in this chamber promising us that you'd come with some solid plans and telling us how this money would be balanced in future. Because although there might be a balanced budget this year, the next few years don't look that bright. And I think that if you can't come with any serious plans, how on earth do you expect us to vote for it? We're not sat talking to the finance team like you are every day. We're basically voting on what you're telling us. And what you're telling us today, there's no way I can support what you've just come out with, because you're kicking the can down the road and you've not come forward with any real plans. So how on earth can we support it?
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'm going to ask. No, I'm going to use my discretion not to take any from the screen. So I'm just going to come to Councillor Parkin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Barker, you're right about the £2 billion hole. As I said, it's in the MTFP. Yep. And it was at that time. However, you're right, you didn't leave us with a £2 million hole in the account, but it was a £2 billion in the MTFP. Yep. So, and for Councillor Hancock, I believe it was. Yeah, I did say that we bring an action plan to the council, which is what we've done. It's important to understand, though, that the senior management team are the owners of that plan, and that can change at any time. It's the senior management. So I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded, so we do need to come to a recorded vote for this because it's a financial item. So I'm going to hand over to the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chair. I will read your name. Can you please tell me if you're for, against, or abstaining? Councillor P. Wright. Councillor Wheelhouse. Councillor Welton. Councillor Thacker. Councillor Tate. Councillor Stone. Councillor Strafford Stevenson. Councillor Shipman.
Against.
Councillor Ruff. For. Councillor Rowe. Councillor Renwick. Councillor Reader.
Abstain.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Potts. Councillor Platts. Councillor Parkin. Councillor Morley. Councillor Lilly. what would you like me to do about recording your vote?
I'm afraid I've got to abstain because I can't hear the debate.
Okay,
We need to talk about this, Chair, because we need some discipline in using this stuff.
thank you. Councillor Liggett? For. Councillor Lewis? Councillor Lacey? Councillor Kerry? Councillor Kenyon? Councillor Jones? Oh, she's on the screen. Thank you.
Abstain.
Councillor Hartshorn?
Against.
Councillor Hancock?
Against.
Councillor Hall? Councillor Gomez-Rini? Councillor Fennell? Councillor Mark Foster? Councillor Emmons? Councillor Elliott? Councillor Dayton? Councillor Cupit? Councillor Cornwall?
Against.
Councillor Cooper? Councillor Clough? Councillor Birkin?
Abstain.
Councillor Barker?
Against.
And Councillor Ancliffe is not here.
Thank you. The results are 25 votes for, 8 against and 5 abstentions. So 1 to 6 are carried. So those now involved with Ricknell will need to leave for the housing revenue account section. So we'll need a chair. So have we any nominations for chair for the HRA part of it? You can't have a cabinet member as chair. Councillor Barker's nominated himself.
I'll second
Right,
that.
we've got a seconder. So we have a nomination for Councillor Lewis. Is that right? So we've got 2 people. Yeah, we've got to vote for it. All those in favour of Councillor Barker? All those against? All those in favour of Councillor Lewis? All those against? Councillor Lewis, it's carried. The chair is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, the power. Right. So yes, the next item then is the housing revenue account. So speaking on this particular item, Councillor Parkin.
Yet again. There are no major changes to report in the HRA. We are recommending to council that rents increase in line with government guidance, as this council has done for many years, which is 4.1% this year. The RHL management fee has been renegotiated in line with the requirements of the new agreement and will be £9.75 million for next year. The HRA capital programme includes an additional allocation again this year for further modernisation and eco works on the non-traditional housing stock. Back to you, Chair. Yeah, I will move the recommendations 7 to 13.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Parkin. We have those recommendations moved. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Cupit. I think we now open it up to any discussion, any questions. Councillor Barker.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Again, it's I know we're tied into this a social housing rent standard, and we're looking at 4.1% increase, which no matter how you look at it, that's on top of everything else that we've just spoke about. That's a lot of money to a lot of people. I think that we ought to be at least challenging that standard, because that could keep going up. I mean, when we were in control, it were actually we had to reduce rents, which created another problem. So I'm not quite sure whether that's a good standard or how it's calculated or who tells you what it is. So I personally, on top of everything else, I can't vote for that. And I know it's something we've got to do, but I agree with most of all the other stuff about Rick Northern, how much money. But I'd personally, I'm going to abstain on just on that one, because 4.1%, there's no saying what it could be next year. And it's just constant. Well, I don't think we can. That's the legalities is that if we're tied into that, then I think that's what it comes out at. But I think we should challenge that. That's what my recommendation.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Barker. Councillor Parkin, do you want to come back on that? Or okay, Councillor Ship.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with what Councillor Barker just said. I think we can amend it. I think if we remove point 8 and replace it with take ourselves out of the social housing rent standard, then I would vote for it. But by leaving that in there, I think that's a massive increase for people that are going to be on some of the lowest incomes in this district.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Ship and Councillor Parkin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it is a large amount. I don't disagree with that. However, you have to remember that Ricknold, like every other body, has to live in the current economy, and their costs are set to rise, and that's what the standard has recognised. Okay, so that's why it is 4.1 CPI plus 1.1%. That's why it is that this year. Okay, so like you, I am extremely concerned about people and the affordability of these rents. It's not something that we do lightly, but we are aware that if we don't accept this recommendation, it's highly likely that that Ricknold will get into difficulties during the following year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Any further comments or questions? Oh, sorry, you moved an amendment. So do you have a second? Okay. So we have to deal with that one first, and it's a recorded vote. So over to Mr. Sternberg.
Thank you, Chair. As before, I'll read your name. Please tell me whether you're for, against, or abstaining in relation to the amendment. Councillor Wright. Against. Councillor Wheelhouse. Against. Councillor Tate. Councillor Stone. Councillor Strafford-Stevenson. Councillor Shipman.
For.
Councillor Rowe. Councillor Rennick. Councillor Reader. For. Councillor Powell. Councillor Potts. Councillor Platts. Councillor Parkin. Councillor Morley. Councillor Lilly.
For.
Councillor Liggett.
Against.
Councillor Lewis.
Against.
Councillor Lacey. Councillor Kerry. Councillor Kenyon. Councillor Hartshorn.
For.
Councillor Hancock.
For.
Councillor Hall. Councillor Gomez-Rini. Councillor Funnell. Councillor Mark Foster. Councillor Emmons. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Dayton. Councillor Cupit. Councillor Cornwall. For. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Birkin.
For.
Councillor Barker.
For.
Thank you very much indeed. So the amendment has been lost, 13 to 20 with 1 abstention. Now we move to the main recommendations. Mr. Sternberg, if you would.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Wright.
4.
Councillor Wheelhouse. Councillor Tate. Councillor Stone. Abstain, thank you. Councillor Strafford Stevenson. Councillor Shipman.
Against.
Councillor Rowe.
4.
Councillor Rennick. Councillor Reader.
Abstain.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Potts. Councillor Platts. Councillor Pickering. He's not here. Councillor Parkin. Councillor Morley. Councillor Lilly.
Abstain.
Councillor Liggett. 4. Councillor Lewis.
4.
Councillor Lacey. Councillor Kerry. Councillor Kenyon. Councillor Hartshorn.
Against.
Councillor Hancock.
Against.
Councillor Hall. Councillor Gomez Rini. Councillor Funel. Councillor Mark Foster. Councillor Emmons. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Dayton. Councillor Cupit. Councillor Cornwall.
Against.
Councillor Cooper. Councillor Birkin.
Abstain.
Councillor Barker.
Abstain.
And
Thank you, Mr. Sternberg. And the motion is carried 19 with 8 abstentions and 7 against. Thank you very much indeed. And we can bring back in the folks. And thank you for your forbearance. That was rather fun.
Very warm, Councillor Lewis. Thank you. So item 11, Treasury Strategy Report. Back to you, Councillor Parkin.
Surprise, surprise. Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with the necessary information to approve the suite of Treasury strategies for the period 2021/22 to 2024/25. These strategies are compliant with both the SIPFA Code for Treasury Management and MHCLG's investment guidance of 2018. The suite comprises of 3 strategies: Treasury Management Strategy, which provides the framework for managing the Council's cash flows, borrowing and investments for the period; the Capital Strategy, which is intended to provide a high-level, concise overview of how capital expenditure, capital financing and treasury management activity contribute to the provision of the Council's services; and the Investment Strategy, which focuses on investments made for service purposes and commercial reasons, rather than those made for treasury management. All 3 strategies have been appended to the report for members' consideration, and I'll move the recommendations back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cupit. Any comments or questions? Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Parkin. My question, to be truthful, overall on this, because again, we've got some significant bits missing, particularly on the investment strategy, and I apologise if it's here and I've missed it, but I have been through several times. We've obviously got the JVC, And the situation around the industry that they're in has changed considerably over the last 12 months. Construction costs have shot through the roof. And obviously, as we feel, well, it's going to be the biggest pinch on cost of living in a generation, house buying is also going to go down. And I think it's important that we've got some sort of information on how that is going to affect our investment in that. And as I say, it seems to be missing from here altogether. So I'd appreciate if you could update us on what's happening there, please.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Parkin to reply.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not really in the business of making those kind of predictions, but we do have to make guidance and make certain assumptions. However, the rate of sales of houses is not one that I'm expertly equipped to be able to answer. And with respect, I think it would be very difficult to predict that at this point in time. There are some assumptions that we could make. However, they are no more than that, assumptions. Okay, if there's further detail that is required, then please feel free to ask it at Audit Committee when you get the next opportunity.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? It's been carried. Thank you. So move to item 12, questions from members asked under procedure rule 9.2. We have one question from Councillor Barker to Councillor Powell. Over to you, please, Councillor Barker.
There you go. Can I ask if and when will a car parking strategy for the whole district be produced? Thank you.
That took too long. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. When I saw Councillor Barker's question, I thought there was a very quick answer. And I thought there was a medium length answer. And there was a very long and boring answer. And I was going to ask you which one you wanted, but I won't. The very quick answer is it's not if. And when. It actually went to Cabinet last week. But can I thank you for your question, because it does give me an opportunity to update the council on our evolving policies and parking strategies. Most members will know that when many of our mostly non-trad housing estates were built in the post-war period, car ownership was extremely limited, in some cases zero. As a result, at that time, little or no provision was made for parking, and not a lot has happened since. There was a recent scrutiny review of residential parking and found, of course, as we all know as members, that it's a district-wide issue. And I think all our email inboxes will have parking things in them. But that review did coincide with work on a strategy to address those problems. As I said last week, the Cabinet approved a strategy which sets out how we intend to improve parking across the district going forward. But I must add, in all honesty, that because of the scale of the challenge, this will take a number of years to actually implement. However, we did feel that a start had to be made. So we've earmarked £288,000 annually, funded by the Housing Revenue Account. And as you all know, that can only be used on HRA land and assets. The approach means that locations we consider to be in the most need, which usually coincided where we as a council have land available and where we have a high proportion of property we own. So using that criteria, we have identified 5 sites in the district. Work is ongoing, and in some cases that's an advanced stage to get those underway. From that initial annual budget, we had some surplus funds. So we're going to carry out a trial of grass protection surfacing. This trial will allow us to assess the viability of a potentially more cost-effective solution, which may lead to being able to provide parking in more locations in a shorter space of time and more cost effectively. You will find a lot of detail in the cabinet papers, but the scrutiny review also looked at some areas that they thought needed to be looked at. One of those has come through at Apano, where we are doing a considerable amount of work. It's already been through planning, waiting for some decisions from highways at DCC, and funding is available for it. So that's the sort of medium term answer. Councillor Barker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Barker, do you have a supplementary question arising from that?
I have.
And over to you.
Thank you. I have read all the cabinet reports and the various papers, so I was aware of that. But the question to me, and I'd say there's rationales and criteria for picking the various schemes that are in the pipeline, but I'm still not clear how Appenol has come to the top of that list. As it's recognised in the papers, and you've just said it, every village stroke estate has got issues with parking. Everyone. Therefore, I'd like to see a full list. It's only a partial one of all that. So all members, not just us. There's issues all around village.
Councillor Barker, are you asking the
I
question?
will be asking
It
the
feels
question,
like a
yeah.
bit of a speech developing here.
It is a speech, but I'm nearly there.
Be quick.
But we report back to all as residents, whether it's at Thorn Lane, Ducton, Grassmore, Eckington, Claycross. So we're not to know where we are on that list. However, my specific question, can you explain to me the rationale for spending £125,000 of HRA money on 40 parking spaces in Appenall when it already has provision for 18 places and there are only 45 properties managed by Ricknell in Appenall? And I just hope it's not because it has a lovely view down a dale. That's a pun, that. So can you answer me that? Because I'm still confused around that.
Councillor Powell to reply.
I regret your confusion, Councillor Barker. And that was quite clever, that, looking down the dale.
Thank you.
I wondered when that would come up, to be honest. And I did anticipate it might be today. Right, Appenell, how did that begin? Well, let's go back to the scrutiny review, in which they identified 3 areas. At that point, the process was being managed by Ricknell Homes, and they said they wanted to look at 3 areas: Holy Moorside, Kelstedge, and Appenell. For various reasons, the Holy Moorside one, after consultation, was put on hold. The Kelstedge one, COVID interfered. I don't want to make that an excuse, but it did interfere, and that will probably be on the list for next year. And that left Appenell. If you actually look at the figures, the amount per parking space at Appenell is no greater than anywhere else. And as I say, that I will stand by it, but it was a Ricknell initiative, which was then carried forward when we did the strategy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Thank you, Councillor Barker. So move to item 13 to consider motions from members under procedure rule number 10. And the first one is a motion submitted by Councillor Shipman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping this is something we can all agree on, seeing as every single leader in the Viper meetings has acknowledged that this needs to happen. So fingers crossed there will be a consensus on this issue. But I think remote meetings need to happen. Let's face it here. You know, we've got people sat at home who can't partake in this meeting, including the leader of the council here. And it's just unacceptable. It would be more efficient if we could all do it from home, because we've all got jobs, we've got kids, we've got, you know, people we need to care for, etc. And I think we seriously need to be pushing this as a district council, that, you know, we're at the spearhead of this movement, because we need to have remote or hybrid meetings. And I'm not saying it's prescriptive, but the option needs to be there for district councils to hold remote or hybrid meetings, because we just can't have this. You know, we can't have these discussions where we're going, we need to reduce the amount of councillors coming in. Every single one of us, 53 councillors that are elected to this chamber, deserve to be here representing their communities. And I think it's just totally unacceptable that we have people sat at home that can't vote on behalf of their residents. So I seriously hope we can all come together behind this motion and just let's start pushing it forward properly.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Hancock.
I'll reserve the right to speak, please, Chair.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Lilly.
Yeah, I'm coming from this at a different angle, Chair. And this is one of the reasons why I'm sat down, because basically one of the disciplines are because people are not actually close enough to the microphone, I can't hear. So I'm using this as a demonstration. Yeah. All I'm suggesting is I'm going to support this motion simply because it puts another club in the bag. Because when I turned up here today, I didn't know whether I'd be able to hear or not. Yeah. The last time I came in here, we just had half of this and it was just a small committee meeting. And I could make the reasonable adjustments to be able to hear what was going off. Today, no matter how I've tried with this machine, with these machines and whatever else, the discipline is not there. It needs to be worked on and put in. But if that is not forthcoming by the next council meeting, I will be looking to try and get what this is suggesting, reasonable adjustment for my disability. And I'm not just talking about for me, I'm talking about anybody else, because the last meeting I went to in the leisure centre, there were people with so-called perfect hearing that couldn't hear, and no reasonable adjustment was made. So I'm going to support this motion to try and promote reasonable adjustment for people like myself that have got a hearing difficulty and others.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. And I think given your comments, I think for the remainder of the meeting, I'm sure people will not mind if I say that we'll remain seated to make sure that you are hearing the microphone clearly. Councillor Cupid, and then I'll come to Councillor Birkin.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for allowing me to remain seated. I think we do all agree on the principles behind this motion, that it's beneficial for councils to be able to run virtual or hybrid meetings, even if that sometimes poses challenges, as I think we've seen today and in previous months. But we do need to always balance that, because sometimes they are better in person, and I do welcome us being back in the chamber, I think, whenever possible, and recognising reasons that members have. I think we all know that the government did consult on this, and we're awaiting the outcomes and hopefully for them to pursue this legislation as soon as possible. And as far as I understand it, they are supportive of it. In terms of lobbying, this council, and I know Councillor Dale as leader, have been pushing forward, sort of accelerating the government to get that through in terms of the LGA, DCN, and also raising it directly with ministers, and Councillor Dale has done that, as well as I think officers of the council. So I think, given that we're already doing it, I'm not sure there's a lot to be gained by writing another letter to the Secretary of State. So I can't support the motion personally, but I do agree with the principles, and I know that both myself, Councillor Dale, and I'm sure all members will continue to lobby the government to introduce this as soon as possible.
Thank you. And Councillor Birkin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I completely agree with Councillor Shipman's proposal here. I think it goes without saying that we need to make the availability for all members to take part in meetings. And we've seen, because of COVID, that we have been able to sort of manage with remote meetings. I think I'd agree with Councillor Cupid that maybe hybrid meetings are the best. I'm sad that she doesn't want to write to the government. I would have thought that Mr. Johnson would appreciate a letter from our area, distract him into something else. I agree with Councillor Lilly as well, but my other point that I'm making is I am classed as, I'm not sure whether it's extremely or certainly clinically vulnerable. So whether I should be here or not is another point. I've not told my wife, but there we go. But also, I'm very grateful to you letting us sit down as well, because I have a mobility problem. I had a spinal injury some years ago, and getting into the council is not easy sometimes. most of our colleagues from both sides of this committee, this council, who are at home, I think have got one or other medical problem. And I think by having this sort of opportunity continued for councils would enable, as I said before, everyone to be able to take part. If I'm not mistaken, the government is able to have proxy votes, I think it was, and they've continued that without any change whatsoever, whilst denying the opportunity for members in lower level council, lower level meetings to be able to share in the same sort of opportunities. So I wholeheartedly endorse what Councillor Shipman is putting here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Birkin, and obviously not trying to start a precedent today, but I just thought it was best while Councillor Lilly had raised an issue that we do. Some of us who've been on council a long time, I've been a councillor 20 years now, we know that the rule of debate is to stand and speak. And that's the same the length and breadth of the country, but I think maybe we need to think about what's right for North East Derbyshire and our members. So maybe that's something for governance, but that's something for another day. But I think the comments we're hearing are very important. So Councillor Rennick.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I struggling to understand why we do have to stand. It is a bit awkward in this room. It was awkward before these small tables. You're half standing up, half bending over, you're trying to read your stuff. You all sit down. So I completely agree. We should be all sitting down. It's easier to get to your microphone. But more importantly than that, that's just a one-off, well-level opportunity, is that ever since I've been in this to these meetings, Councillor Lilly has complained about his access to hearing this meeting. And I'm fed up of actually nothing being done about this. It's absolutely appalling that we have not found a solution to Councillor Lilly's problem. I don't care what it costs, but I'm sure there's technology that to actually help him to hear this meeting properly. And I will be disappointed if we don't find a solution very soon. It's painful to listen every month to him complain he can't hear. This is not addressing his needs, and I've yet to find out what solutions he needs and why we haven't addressed it.
Councillor Mark Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to say much the same thing for Councillor Lilly, but I think Councillor Rennick said it much better than I could. But as to the actual motion itself, something that I don't make any sense of, it talks about the government current advice to no longer asking people to work from home in England and Scotland. Wales and Northern Ireland is different, but here we've got residents and the public being asked to turn up for work. Now, for myself, my own view is that we should be doing exactly the same. I know there's difficulties. I know there's things we have to get around. I know there's difficulties when we went to Kilmarsh Sports Centre. It was very difficult to hear people. I struggle myself and my hearing's okay. So I know there's difficulties we can work around, but for actually turning up, I believe myself that we should be turning up like the residents would expect us to, rather than working from home. That's my own view. When it comes to the actual motion itself, it's something I would consider voting for, and I could be supportive of it if it were amended. Now, if it only included Lib Dems working from home, then you would find me voting for it. So maybe you consider that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you. Councillor Foster has talked about a lot that I was going to say anyway, but I mean, like the government, where Councillor Shipman states the government asking people to work from home, but for the last nearly 2 years, we've had that situation. The government wants us to get back to normal. The government wants us to people to start going back to work. And I think as councillors, we should be setting an example as well. We should be going to the office. We're elected to come to meetings. We know the situation, and hopefully once COVID passes and things do get back to normal, it is something that we should be encouraging and setting an example. About one of the other things I was going to say is as well about residents. One of the time, I mean, when members of the public are here, residents who vote for us, it's usually one of the times they do get to see us. Many times I've heard from different residents, and one said to me, the only time we see a local council is 1 month before the election. We don't see them 3 years or 11 months apart from 1 month before the standing. And here is a chance for us to allow residents to see us. No, well, I'm just mentioning. So I do think for coming to meetings is really important, not just for us, not just for the council, but also for members of the public and residents to see us. Thank you.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. This is an interesting debate. I mean, I think over the course of the last couple of years, the way local government's work's been completely transformed anyway. And I think the approach of working much more in a hybrid manner is something we'll see much more of in the future for certain committees, etc. But I do think it's absolutely right that for meetings like councils and cabinets and so on, that we do get that opportunity to meet face to face and have those key debates. I just wanted to touch on Councillor Lilly and the hearing issue. I think he's absolutely right. I'm in the same boat as you know, Chairman, and with a complete deafness in my left ear and a partial hearing in my right, I do struggle with these. And another thing that I found is that in the last couple of years, it's been quite transformative to be able to plug your ears in, by earphones into the equipment, and indeed these particular devices allow that as well. I believe I can see a jack in here which would allow equipment to be plugged in directly into these units, which would feed into the ear, and I do that at County Council as well. But I do understand that this room doesn't have a loop system in. I don't know if there's a technical reason that this room doesn't have a loop system. It may have been rectified recently, but it does. Okay, well, so that's good to hear. But all accommodations should be made to accommodate those that do have those particular issues. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Dale.
Thanks very much, Chair. I won't go into too much detail because I think most of the points have been covered. Needless to say, I think I agree with the general thrust of the previous contributions that it'd be very useful to have the flexibility as a council to be able to have virtual meetings, but there is a time and a place for them. And I think there are certain meetings that are best done in person. And just to add a little bit more to what Councillor Cupit said, the government did consult on this topic last year. There was a call for evidence. All of the noises that I'm hearing suggest that the government fully intends to introduce measures and the flexibilities, and it's simply a case that sadly it requires primary legislation. It's got to be considered against other legislative priorities within the House of Commons. But it's certainly an issue that we regularly raise, both myself and officers, through things like LGA and the DCN. Any opportunity we do raise it, and all of the noise suggests that it will come forward. It's a matter of time, and therefore I don't particularly see the merit in writing a further letter. But we will, gladly assure council that we'll continue to raise it at every opportunity with relevant, in relevant regional and national forums. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. It's not often I find myself agreeing with Councillor Rennick, but today I do. And I think it's important, whilst not having this ability, and this is the key thing, it is an ability, it's not saying replace physical meetings, but to allow other members to join from home, I think is important. We've seen the leader today who wasn't even able to recommend his own motion because it's not permitted under current legislation. So I'm actually quite surprised by his response, to be truthful. In terms of sorry, I forget Joe's surname. It's Councillor Birkin. 100%. On parish, we have a wheelchair user who is elected. In bad weather, she can't get out of the house. So you need to have things like this to actually increase proper diversity. So we are representing our residents. I think Councillor Hall let something slip there that he clearly doesn't necessarily see all of his residents. I think across all of the parties here, there are a lot of members who are seen regularly by their residents. Yes, it's nice to get here and do that, but there are circumstances that do prevent people. We know from later on the agenda it's also going to come up, and I think it is important. And I remember the last motion, or one of the last motions of the old council, which was actually put forward by the Conservative group, and that was about continuous improvement and making sure that we took these steps and we did them proactively. And I know there's been a change of leadership in the Conservative group, but it would have been so much better to see the current leadership taking that forward and respecting what they voted for and what actually I think everyone else in this council voted for at the time. It was one of those rare consensuses. So I think we should be moving it, and I think we should be doing it proactively, not just sitting and waiting for Westminster to follow.
Thank you. Councillor Shipman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, Councillor Lilly's issue, he complains about every meeting, and we still put him at the back of the room. I don't understand why he's not at the front of the room, where it's closer to where most people are talking throughout the meeting. So I found that bizarre. I think officers need to address that ASAP, to be honest, because it is getting a bit kind of tiresome hearing it every meeting. But in terms of the actual motion, it does surprise me because we've had the same debate in Viper, and all group leaders have gone, yeah, we need it, yes, we need to do it. And I think if we could all vote it through and have this consensus rather than just the Conservative group speaking to whoever it's speaking to, and the leader, Councillor Dale, can go and say, our council across all the groups wants to see this. Like I said, it's not prescriptive. We can apply it as and when, depending on what meetings we want. I'll probably still be coming to these meetings as much as I can. But I totally understand that other councillors have got accessibility issues, like I say, childcare. And come on, I mean, it's not a hard motion to vote for. If it really is really going to kill you to vote for writing a letter, I think that when we talk about playing politics in this chamber, I think that's the biggest example of it.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded then. All those in favour of the motion, please show your hands. All those against? Thank you. The motion is lost. However, I think a number of points have been raised through that debate that I can see the monitoring officer taking careful note. There does have to be a reasonable adjustment and a number of comments that all sides should support and will do in due course as recommendations are sorted out about how we can improve access, full stop. And as somebody who's an advocate for the deaf community, I'm really pleased that the BSL Act is very close to fruition, and I've campaigned for a long time for access for the deaf community, which is non-existent in the local government. Pardon? Yeah. So next motion then, Councillor Hancock, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this one is written in the spirit of continuous improvement, so I suspect, like the last one, it's going to fall. But I think it's important that we acknowledge that things went wrong. I also think it's important that we acknowledge the hard work that our refuse collectors do and the very challenging conditions that we have in North East Derbyshire, which are very different to what we have in the borough, which is often thrown at us. I did correspond with Councillor Cupit, and she has promised me that this is going to be looked into, but I think we need a commitment. So again, it's a proactive commitment to make sure that we don't have a repetition of the situation that arose this year, leaving people for 3 weeks without a black bin collection. Yeah, it may even have been 4 at some points. The teams work incredibly hard. It wasn't an issue with the refuse collectors themselves. It was a planning issue. It was a logistical issue, and we need to address that. But we need to make sure that we actually accept ownership of that. That yes, it went wrong, and yes, we're definitely going to put it right and make sure we do.
I'll second that, Chair.
It's robbed me of my only question in that bit. Right, so it's been moved and seconded. Any comments or questions? Councillor Cupit.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hancock, for raising, I think what, as you've said, is an important issue. And I think this is a good opportunity to try and explain and debate what happened with the bin collections over Christmas and more widely, you know, in terms of how we plan and logistics. As you said, from my response to you I think it's about a month ago, and as I've said to Viper members and quite a few other members and residents who've raised this issue with me, I do understand sharing and I take on board the concerns expressed by some families over the Christmas period with collections this year. And I committed to review and try to prevent this in future years, which with officers we've already done and have been doing with Darren and Steve. So just to firstly look back at this year, I have to note it was a really difficult and unique set of circumstances that led to the longer collection times faced by some. Because of the ways the bank holidays fell, to maintain collections over Christmas week, we'd have had to compress an already very packed and tight usual five-day service into 3 days at a time when the transfer and tip stations have shorter opening hours over Christmas and when there was a really significant predicted risk of high absences due to COVID or winter illnesses. Sadly, those absences did indeed transpire due to the new COVID variant, and at times during the first few weeks of the new year, we had up to 20 refuse staff off, which was quite significant, and then we had a little bit of snow thrown in as well. So with that, I just want to, I know Councillor Dale has already done it, and I know you've done it, Councillor Hancock, but I want to offer my thanks to all those who volunteered to help maintain services, and to all our refuse drivers, loaders and street scene staff who go above and beyond on a day-to-day basis, and I think provide a really good service throughout the year, particularly when faced with the sort of natural and day-to-day challenges that come from frontline services. You know, quite often I see those. And I think we do have to recognise that as a council, we have maintained services throughout the pandemic when other areas have had quite severe difficulties and disruption that we've seen nationally. And I just want to say, once you get behind with collections, it is very difficult to catch up. And there was a high risk that would have happened over the Christmas period if we'd have done that. Indeed, other councils who did continue collections over those 3 days had that exact problem and then had to suspend services. Sheffield, Chesterfield, Amber Valley and Derbyshire Dales, and some of those are only just catching up a month later now. I do want to just say, in terms of, I know this isn't a claim that you've made, Councillor Hancock, but I just wanted to clarify comments that there was a decision to benefit one part of the district, because that's factually incorrect, as the North calendar has had similar issues in the past. I don't believe early collections really help with Christmas waste. And I just wanted to highlight to the Chamber that weights, you know, rubbish weights, particularly recycling, have been more than double across the district since Christmas, which is unprecedented. And we have also, from a health and safety point of view, which I know is in your motion, we've put on extra services where possible to reduce bin and wagon weights, to make sure that doesn't have an impact on staff. So looking forward, I do understand the difficulties of the Christmas period and the other factors that I've outlined, and I reiterate what I've said to you in terms of wanting to mitigate it in future. In terms of what we're doing, we've looked at next year and it won't happen because the way they fall. We've got plans in place to maintain collections over the Jubilee bank holidays, which are a bit strange this year. And with officers, we are also starting to look at the current collection rounds, particularly where there's been significant housing growth. We won't get into that today. Routes are getting really tight in the south. So we do need to carefully manage that. So it's not going to happen quickly. So we've got to make sure we don't sort of make it worse. But we're looking ahead to the new national waste legislation, which may change collections in terms of food waste and recycling. So whilst I agree with the points of this motion, I just can't support it today, as I don't think it factors in the complexities of collections and some other changes that are coming through. But I do apologise for any inconvenience that residents felt, and I want to reiterate the commitment that I've made as Cabinet Member to do everything I can to make sure all collections are as close to fortnightly as possible, and to review the wider calendar to facilitate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Charlotte, for that. And I appreciate the difficulties that's happened. You know, we're a one-off. I know he explained it at the Barker meeting, what happened, and you've just reiterated that. And cheerio. And but I'd say I'd like to thank all the staff for doing, you know, over Christmas. We are going to sort of vote for this motion, but I accept what you've said, that you will try your best so it won't happen again, and look at things prior to the Christmas period and all that sort of stuff. But it's just sort of putting it on record that at least we're going to try as best. And also there's a caveat in this, that let's not forget the dustbin men need holiday as well as. So, you know, there's a solution to this. You just make them work over Christmas. But I don't think that's the way forward either. So, you know, I don't want to sort of commit to anything like that. I think the bin men fully deserve the Christmas holidays like everybody else. So don't let's throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. Is that appropriate?
Well, bin men certainly wasn't. It's refuse collectors. Councillor Rennick.
Oh, I do apologise for the refuse collector.
Yeah, I was quite surprised at this motion because actually in the 30 years near that I've lived, I can count on probably one hand the amount of times my bin's been missed. I think we have an exceptional service. As a county councillor responsible for waste, cabinet member, I can tell you now, our district does superbly compared with other parts of the country, and even in Derbyshire in terms of the waste collect. And you also have to bear in mind that the waste when it leaves here, we've had extra services put on. I thought the Christmas service was a really great idea. But then we've got waste transfer systems at county to manage as well, and they store up, and there's a risk in that. I can't support the motion because actually, against all perceived guidance and wisdom at the moment around carbon reduction and helping our environments, actually we're wanting actually smaller bins. The whole slim bin, we talked about slim bins, that was to actually reduce waste. And also at DEFRA, I really hate to point this out to anybody who's not read the latest consultation, is that there is a move to actually go to 3 weekly collections to actually reduce waste. And so from my point of view, it's incumbent on us all to get along towards the waste hierarchy of, sort of like reducing, reusing, recycling before we get to energy and landfill. But I do think that where there's specific problems in certain parts of areas, and I noticed that Councillor Hancock's motion actually mentioned about certain of our residents might have struggled to get to recycling centres. Don't forget at the moment, if you go shopping, most supermarkets have basic recycling. And I think perhaps going forward, it's looking at helping those who really can't get their waste recycled. It's incumbent on all to get our own waste recycled above and beyond the facilities provided by our district. And so I was going to say thank you to our bin service. I think it's exceptional service we get.
Thank you, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rennick's stolen part of my thunder this time, but just in reference to Councillor Hancock's motion, the third point down, that it does talk about that many residents have only a 180 litre household waste bin. Now it's something that's been looked at, I guess, not just by our council, but by other councils, and the amount of waste that is produced and the amount of waste, the carbon footprint, I guess, and trying to reduce it. And I think some councils have found that when they provide excessively large bins, that the bins are then filled with other things like DIY material and building material and things like that. So even though it's put that we only have a 180 litre household bins, I think for us as a council and members of the public, I guess it's sufficient. I'd say so anyway. Thank you.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a brief point. I think the other aspect of this that we're missing and perhaps ought to be thinking about as well is the power of the consumer in terms of going to the shops and buying items which are superbly well wrapped, shall we say, in plastics, etc., etc. We've all brought home our shopping and then decanted it all, and when you've unwrapped it and you've got half of its waste, that's another important consideration. We need to sort of get in there and use our buying power as an organisation as well, and perhaps use a little less single-use plastic as well in the future. Might be the way forward, Chairman. But I do believe actually that it's possible for residents to request a second recycling bin in certain circumstances if they got that amount of waste. So let's not forget that as well.
Any other comments? Or Councillor Birkin?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Is there still a legal limit on how long bins can go without being collected? Many years ago, I was involved with the bin men as they were then, and there was a legal requirement on that at a specific time. Is there something like that now? Would the 3 weeks that Councillor Rennick's talking about, would that go beyond any legal requirements?
Any other comments or questions? If not, I'll come to you, Councillor Shipman.
Thank you, Chair. Without trying to replace the cabinet member for waste collections, there's other options around it, isn't there? Because one of our policies is that we don't collect bags that are next to bins, which has been a big issue. So when residents are coming to me saying, will the waste collectors take bags at the side of bins, we could have a policy that said yes. There's councils that don't even have any bins. They actually just purely take bags of rubbish. So I don't understand this. There can't possibly be an health and safety issue around it because they get around it somehow. So perhaps that's a way in which residents can at least know that the rubbish is going to get emptied at some point. Because, like I said, when I've been to street scene, the answer was nay, we're not collecting any bags at the side of the bin. And I think that that's a problem, isn't it? Especially when we've got 4 weekly collections at Christmas.
Thank you. Come to you, Councillor Hancock, for right of reply.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Cupid for her response. I think it would be nice to actually just put something on for the public and actually formally do it. So I'm disappointed that she can't support it. The only real thing that I picked up in response to Councillor Hall with regard to the 180 litre bins, the big issue that you have with those is actually it shifts the balance of the central distribution. And actually, if you've got the same amount in a 240 litre bin and in a 180 bin, the 180 bin seems heavier. So that actually puts a much tougher workload on the refuse collectors. I'll make sure I use the right term. But yeah, I mean, the key thing is our refuse collectors did a brilliant job. And yes, we got the unusual circumstances, but I think it still was a scheduling issue. And that was at the crux of it, because they did an absolutely fantastic job in picking up the stuff that was missed. And shorter daylight hours means it's tougher working hours anyway. So it was the scheduling where it fell down, and that's what we need to try and address. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour of the motion, please show your hands. All those against? Any abstentions? The motion has been lost. Thank you. So move to item 14. I move. Thank you. It's not school, Councillor Foster. See you soon. Yeah. So I move that the public be excluded from the meeting during the discussion of the following item of business to avoid the disclosure to them of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 1, 2 and 3, part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006. Do you have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? That's it. So we are now moving into excluded section. So item 15.